Maya's fingers trembled as she handed the cashier a $1 bill. It was all she could afford. $1. That was the price of the dog who had been sitting behind the cage for weeks. He didn't even have a name, just a number on a kennel tag. She had seen the ad on the community board at her local grocery store, listing him for sale, German Shepherd, injured, VUN. Her heart had shattered when she saw the picture. His once beautiful fur was stained with dirt and matted with blood. His eyes were dull, lifeless, as though he had already given up. Her mind raced as she handed over the money, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Was she crazy? $1 for a dog who could be seriously hurt, who might not even survive. But there was something in those eyes, something that called to her in a way she couldn't ignore. She wasn't sure how she could afford it, how she could take care of him. But she couldn't leave him there. She couldn't walk away and let him die in that cage. The door to the kennel creaked open, and the smell of wet fur and fear flooded Maya's senses. The German Shepherd limped toward her slowly, his body ailing, his eyes locked on hers. She knelt down, unsure if he'd even be able to stand, let alone trust her. But he did, slowly, shakily, but there was trust there, faint but undeniable. Maya swallowed hard. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. And in that moment, Maya understood that whatever the cost, whatever the struggle, she had made a choice that would change both their lives forever. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The shelter had always been a place Maya had visited with mixed emotions. Too many animals needing help and too few resources to give them all the care they deserved. The cages were lined up along the walls, filled with dogs and cats, some barking, others cowering, all waiting for someone to take them home. But when Maya saw the sign, a simple note posted on the community board, she froze. German Shepherd, injured, one. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. $1, the price of a life. Maya knew she had to see him. She didn't know why, maybe because he was the only one left, or maybe because something in her heart pulled her toward him, but she couldn't walk away. The shelter's floors were cold beneath her feet as she walked past rows of kennels, her heart beating faster with each step. And then she saw him. Rex. The dog in the picture, a German Shepherd, his coat dirty, his eyes dull with pain. His body was emaciated, his fur matted with blood and dirt. He looked up at her with those heavy eyes, and for a second Maya's heart sank. She wasn't ready for this. She didn't know how she was supposed to save him. How she could possibly afford the vet bills, the food, the time it would take to get him back to health. But there was something about him, something in those eyes that called to her. He wasn't just another dog in the shelter. He wasn't just another statistic. He was Rex, and he needed her. Maya didn't even hesitate as she handed the cashier the $1. $1. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough to erase the pain and fear Rex had endured, but it was a start. As the door to the kennel opened, she took a deep breath, the smell of wet fur and fear filling her lungs. The coldness of the shelter seemed to press in on her, but as Rex limped toward her, his tail tucked between his legs, she could see it, the faintest glimmer of hope. She knelt down, unsure if he would even let her touch him. But when his eyes met hers, there was an unspoken understanding. He was afraid, yes, but he wasn't giving up, not yet. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And I'm not leaving you." Maya reached out and gently stroked his head. Rex leaned into her touch, just slightly, but it was enough. It was enough to remind her that even in the darkest moments, there was always a reason to keep fighting. The first night Rex spent at Maya's house was filled with uncertainty. She had barely had time to prepare for the reality of what she had taken on. The room felt unfamiliar to him, cold, stark in comparison to the shelter where he had spent so many days in silence. The blanket she laid on the floor was soft, but it seemed so foreign to his body, still tense and unfamiliar with comfort. His eyes were wide, his gaze darting around the room. Every sound, every shift in the shadows, sent him into alert mode. But Maya was there. She sat on the floor next to him, watching quietly, understanding that this was not just a physical journey. It was an emotional one as well. She didn't rush him. She didn't try to force him into any kind of routine or comfort. Instead, she sat in silence, her legs crossed, just letting him adjust to her presence. The stillness in the room was almost deafening. The house that usually bustled with the hum of everyday life was silent, a world apart from the chaos of the shelter. Maya's heart ached as she watched Rex curl into himself, his body trembling despite the warmth of the blanket. She had seen dogs before, dogs who had suffered trauma, who had been abandoned or neglected. But nothing had prepared her for this. His pain wasn't just physical. It was in the way he held himself, the way he flinched when she reached out, his fear evident even in his quietest moments. But Maya wouldn't give up. Not yet. Not while he was still breathing. As she sat there, her own exhaustion began to catch up with her. She'd spent the whole day at the shelter, rushing between tasks, and now, with Rex beside her, she realized just how tired she was, how much of her own energy had been drained in just one day of taking care of him. But there was no place for hesitation now. He needed her. And she would be there for him, no matter how hard it got. It was late, the darkness of the night creeping into the corners of the room, but Maya couldn't sleep. Instead, she kept her focus on Rex. As if sensing her quiet determination, the German shepherd lifted his head, his ears twitching slightly. Slowly, cautiously, he dragged his body closer to her. Maya didn't move, didn't even breathe too deeply. She let him come to her when he was ready. And when he finally settled against her side, she felt a quiet warmth grow inside her chest. Her hand slowly moved, not to pet him, but to simply offer a touch. Her fingers brushed against his fur, light and gentle, like a whisper in the night. At first, Rex flinched, his body tensed as if bracing for something painful. But Maya kept her hand there, soft, steady. She wasn't going to hurt him. She wasn't going to give him a reason to pull away. Minutes passed, maybe hours, Maya couldn't tell. But Rex's body slowly began to relax. His tense muscles gave way, and for the first time since she had met him, he seemed to let go. His breathing, which had been shallow and labored, slowed, becoming deep and rhythmic. Maya's heart swelled with quiet relief. This, she realized, was where the real healing began. Not with food, not with medicine. It was this simple, quiet moment of trust. It was the act of just being there for him when the world had already failed him so many times before. In the days that followed, Maya continued to sit with Rex, offering him her presence, her touch, her patience. Each time, he seemed to grow a little stronger, a little more trusting. But the road was far from easy. His wounds, both physical and emotional, ran deep, and sometimes he would pull away, retreating into the corners of the room, his body trembling as the ghosts of his past resurfaced. Maya would let him be, giving him the space he needed, and then, when he was ready, she would be there to help him stand again. One morning, about a week after Rex had arrived at her home, Maya found him standing in the middle of the living room, his body stiff but his eyes alert. He was looking out the window, as if waiting for something, or someone, to appear. She watched him for a moment, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. He wasn't just lying on the floor anymore. He was standing, trying to take back the ground he had lost. She walked over to him, her footsteps light. "Hey, Rex," she said softly, kneeling down to his level. His eyes met hers, and there it was again. Something in his gaze that wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, something brighter. Maya reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against his fur. For a long moment, Rex didn't move. He didn't flinch. And then, as if finally realizing that he wasn't alone anymore, he nudged his head against her hand, pressing into her touch, asking for more. She couldn't help the tears that filled her eyes. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper. It was hope. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're doing so well." In that moment, Maya realized that she hadn't just rescued Rex. He had rescued her too. His fight, his will to survive, had reignited something inside her, a part of herself she had long forgotten. She had always been someone who played it safe, who stuck to the routines of everyday life. But with Rex by her side, everything had changed. Her life, like his, was no longer about just surviving. It was about living again. It was about hope. It was early morning when the first storm came, and Rex was already trembling in the corner of the living room. Maya watched him from the kitchen, her heart clenching in sympathy. The wind howled outside, the sound growing louder, pushing against the walls of the house like an invisible force trying to break through. It wasn't the rain that unsettled Rex. It was the storm that brewed in his chest every time a gust of wind rattled the windows, every time the thunder rumbled in the distance. He'd been through too much, and those deep scars didn't just disappear. Maya knew the signs. She had come to recognize the subtle shifts in his body language. The way his ears would flatten against his head, the way his eyes would widen with fear, and how his body would stiffen, as though bracing for something. But she had learned, too, that Rex would never act out of malice. His fear was a shield, a defense mechanism against a world that had hurt him for so long. She set the bowl down on the counter, wiping her hands on her jeans. It was strange. How everything she thought she understood about life seemed to shift when Rex entered it. He had shown her that there were layers to pain. Pain that could break you. Pain that could heal you, and pain that you couldn't escape no matter how hard you tried. It had been the same for her in its own way. She had lived through moments of deep loss, moments where she couldn't see the way out. But Rex had taught her something profound. He had taught her that healing wasn't linear. It wasn't a clean-cut line from darkness to light. It was messy, full of setbacks and full of hope, all at the same time. The thunder cracked in the distance again, louder this time, and Rex's body tensed. His breath quickened, and Maya could see the sharp, panicked look in his eyes. She moved toward him slowly, knowing better than to make any sudden moves. As she reached him, Rex's ears flattened completely, and he backed up, trying to put more distance between himself and the approaching storm. "It's okay, Rex," she said softly, kneeling down in front of him, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I'm here. You're safe now." But Rex wasn't listening. His eyes darted to the window, where the wind rustled the trees outside. His body was rigid, his muscles coiled tightly, ready to bolt at the slightest movement. Maya reached out slowly, her hand hovering in the air in front of him. She had learned to respect his boundaries, to never push him when he wasn't ready. But today, the fear in his eyes seemed to drown out the safety of her presence. For a moment, Maya hesitated. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence between them. She had never seen him this afraid before. She had watched him grow stronger, regain trust. But now, in this storm, it was as though all of that progress had been swept away. Was she doing enough? Was she the right person to help him through this? Rex gave a soft, terrified whine as the thunder rolled again. It was like a primal reaction, a muscle memory from a life full of fear that he couldn't outrun. Maya's heart broke for him in that moment. She hated seeing him like this, so small, so vulnerable, despite the incredible strength he had shown her in the past weeks. She took a deep breath and, in a slow, deliberate motion, placed her hand on his shoulder. The touch was light at first, giving him the space he needed to decide if he wanted to accept it. Rex flinched just slightly, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his body softened just a little, enough for Maya to know that he was still listening, still trying to trust her. "I'm right here," she whispered, her voice low and soothing. "I won't let anything happen to you." She kept her hand there, gentle but firm, as the storm raged outside. Rex's breath began to slow, though his body was still tense, still unsure. But there was something in the way he leaned into her touch, just a little, that gave her hope. It wasn't a cure for his fear, but it was progress. Little by little, she would help him through this. She would teach him that storms didn't have to be faced alone. As the storm passed, Maya stayed with Rex, keeping him close, her hand on his side. The thunder faded, the wind died down, and soon the only sound was the rhythmic beating of his heart, which had slowed to a normal pace. His body had relaxed just slightly, and though the fear still lingered in his eyes, it wasn't as overwhelming. It wasn't as all-consuming. "Good boy," Maya murmured, running her fingers through his fur. "You did so well." In the days that followed, Maya began to understand Rex more deeply. She had seen the fear in his eyes before, but never quite like this. He was still haunted by the trauma of his past, still learning to trust the world around him. But each time the storm passed, Each time he weathered his fears with her by his side. The distance between them closed just a little more. The emotional scars Rex carried weren't something that would heal overnight. Maya knew that. But she also knew that real healing, took time. She had seen it in herself, how the wounds of the past, the ghosts of what had been, could linger in ways that were almost invisible to the world. It wasn't just physical. It was deep, seeping into the quiet corners of your soul, into your memories. And sometimes, the most difficult part of healing wasn't letting go of the past. It was learning how to trust again. Rex's journey would take time, and Maya's too. But the bond between them had grown silently and steadily over the past few weeks. She wasn't giving up on him. Not now, not ever. The storms would come. The fear would resurface. But together, they would face them. Maya could feel the tension in the air every time she stepped into the room with Rex. She'd learned to read his body language. The way his ears twitched when a car passed by outside. The way his eyes darted nervously to the door whenever someone knocked. His fear had become an ever-present shadow, following him through every room, every moment. And it was a constant reminder of the trauma he'd suffered before she had found him. But despite the fear, there were also moments that filled Maya's heart with hope. Small moments. The way Rex would sit a little closer to her on the couch now, his body not quite touching hers, but enough to show that he wasn't pulling away. The way his eyes, once filled with confusion and distrust, would soften when she spoke to him in that quiet, reassuring voice. She had made progress with him. But there were still days when his fear gripped him so tightly that it seemed as though he was lost in it, unable to hear her, unable to trust her. Today felt different, though. The usual tension in the room was there, but it was quieter, almost like Rex was waiting for something. Maya noticed it immediately. He had spent the morning pacing around the house, his tail tucked low, his body language still filled with uncertainty. But when she sat down at the kitchen table to eat her lunch, he came over to her slowly, cautiously. His eyes were on her every movement, his body stiff, but his steps were deliberate. It was as if he was unsure whether he could approach, but something was pulling him toward her, something deep inside him that he hadn't let anyone see for a long time. Maya had been through so many of these moments with him. The hesitant steps, the fleeting glances, but this time it felt different. She could feel his energy, his hesitation, the struggle within him. But there was also something else, a tiny spark of hope that he was willing to trust her again. Maya didn't move, didn't try to coax him with food or treats. She simply sat still, watching him as he came closer, letting him set the pace. She knew that today this moment would be crucial. As Rex reached her, he stopped, just a few feet away, and stared at her. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of uncertainty and longing. Maya held her breath, her heart racing. The room seemed quieter now, as though the storm outside had lulled for just this one moment. She could hear his breathing, shallow at first, but it steadied as he stood there, his body a little less tense than before. It was the tiniest shift, but it was enough. Maya slowly extended her hand, palm open, towards him. Her fingers hovered just inches from his fur, offering him the space to make the decision. Her mind screamed at her not to rush him, not to push too hard, but she couldn't stop herself. She needed to know if he could finally take the first step toward trusting her. For a long moment, Rex didn't move. His eyes flicked between her hand and her face, his body stiffening once again. But Maya remained still, her expression calm, her energy centered. She was patient. She had to be. This wasn't just about healing his body. It was about his heart, about breaking down the walls that had been built up so tightly around him. Finally, it was small. Just the slightest shift in his weight. But it was enough. Slowly, cautiously, he leaned forward and pressed his head gently into her outstretched hand. Maya gasped softly, her breath catching in her throat. The warmth of his fur against her skin was electric, a quiet victory that filled her chest with pride. She didn't move, didn't make any sudden movements, and she certainly didn't try to pull him in closer. She let him come to her, and he did. Her fingers stroked through his fur slowly, feeling the weight of his body relax beneath her touch. Rex didn't flinch this time. He stayed leaning into her hand, his body trembling slightly, but no longer with fear. It was something different now, a quiet surrender, a willingness to trust her, even if just for this moment. "Good boy," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her hand continued to caress his fur, slow and steady. The room seemed to breathe with them, each exhale a tiny release. Each moment of quiet connection a step closer to healing. Maya's heart swelled, and for the first time since she had taken Rex home, she allowed herself to fully feel the weight of what they had both been through. But Rex wasn't just the broken dog she had found in that shelter. He was more than that. He was stronger than she had realized, not just physically, but emotionally. And this small act of trust was the beginning of something bigger. For the rest of the afternoon, Maya stayed with him, sitting on the floor, her hand gently resting on his back. She spoke to him in soft tones, her voice soothing, the words flowing easily now, as if she had found her rhythm with him. Rex, who had once flinched at her every movement, seemed content to stay by her side, occasionally glancing up at her with those soft, trusting eyes. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was enough. For now, it was more than enough. Maya knew that there would be more setbacks, more days when Rex's fear would resurface. But she also knew that there was something between them now that couldn't be undone. It wasn't just the shelter she had saved him from. It was the loneliness, the pain, the fear that had held him back for so long. And now, for the first time, Maya saw him beginning to heal, not just with his body but with his heart. The days had begun to stretch longer, warmer, and the air around the house seemed to hum with possibility. Maya stood at the back door, watching Rex out in the yard, running through the grass with unbridled joy, his tail wagging furiously behind him. She smiled to herself, leaning against the doorframe, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face as she watched him. It had been months since she first brought him home, and now, to see him run so freely, so confidently, filled her heart with a kind of peace she hadn't known in a long time. Rex had changed, transformed in a way that Maya could never have imagined back when she first saw him behind that cage, broken, sick, and abandoned. He had been nothing more than a shadow of a dog when she paid that $1, the weight of the world pressing down on him. But now he was more than just a survivor. He was whole, and so was she in a way she hadn't expected. It hadn't been an easy journey. The fear, the setbacks, the moments when she wasn't sure if she was enough. It all still lingered in the background of their days. But somehow they had both made it through, step by cautious step. She had learned to read his body language, to understand his quiet signals when the world became too much for him. And he, in turn, had learned to trust her, to see her as a safe place, a refuge in a world that had let him down so many times before. But there was more to their journey than just healing from the past. The bond they shared now was one of deep understanding, something that had transcended the need for words or explanations. Maya had become Rex's person, the one he turned to when the world felt too big, too overwhelming. And Rex, in return, had become the anchor in her life, the constant presence that reminded her of her own capacity for love, for resilience. Maya's mind wandered back to the day she had decided to rescue him. She remembered the feeling of helplessness, the fear that gripped her when she first laid eyes on him in that sterile shelter, and how she had wondered if she was doing the right thing. Could she really take on a dog so broken? Could she fix what had been shattered? But now, standing there in the warmth of the afternoon, watching Rex chase after a butterfly with a childlike enthusiasm, she understood something profound. Saving him had been the easy part. Loving him, being there for him when the world wasn't, had been the real work. It hadn't been about fixing him. He wasn't broken. It had been about giving him the space, the safety and the love he needed to heal in his own time, at his own pace. And in doing so, she had healed too. Rex came trotting back to her, his tongue hanging out of his mouth in a playful grin, his eyes shining with joy. Maya crouched down, and he nuzzled her gently, his warm body pressing against hers as if to say, "I'm here, and I'm okay." She laughed softly, running her fingers through his fur, feeling the strong muscles beneath his coat, the life that pulsed through him. "You're perfect, you know that," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're everything I ever needed." Rex looked up at her, his ears perked, his eyes soft and filled with an unmistakable trust. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was her companion, her partner in this life they had built together. The bond they had forged was not just about saving a life, it was about living it, about finding strength in each other. In the months that followed, life for Maya and Rex became a quiet rhythm. They spent their days walking through the neighborhood, Rex trotting beside her, his leash now loose, as if to say that he trusted the world again. They would spend lazy afternoons in the park, where Rex would chase after tennis balls and make friends with other dogs, his confidence growing with every step. He had learned to trust not just her, but the world again. Maya watched him one evening as he lay by the door, his head resting on his paws, looking out at the sunset. The last few rays of the sun bathed him in soft golden light, and she marveled at how far they had both come. Rex had come from a place of deep pain, of abandonment, of fear. And now he was thriving. He was happy, content, at peace. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced down at the screen and saw a message from her friend, asking if she wanted to go to a local cafe. But Maya didn't even need to think about it. She looked down at Rex, who was now looking up at her with those familiar, soulful eyes. "I think we'll stay in tonight," she said to him with a smile. "Just you and me." As the evening settled in and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Maya sat down on the couch, Rex curling up at her feet, his warm presence a constant reminder of how much had changed. The house was quiet, the world outside still and peaceful. She ran her fingers through his fur again, her heart full of gratitude, knowing that this was what she had always needed. Even if she didn't know it at the time. She had given Rex a second chance at life, but in doing so, he had given her a second chance as well. A second chance to believe in love, in healing, in new beginnings. Rex shifted beside her, his head resting on her lap, and she leaned down to kiss the top of his head. He wasn't just a rescued dog, he was family. And Maya knew, in that quiet moment, that their future was unwritten. But whatever came next, they would face it together. Maya sat in the quiet of her living room, the evening light filtering through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the floor. Rex, now fully recovered, lay by her feet, his head resting on her lap, eyes closed in contentment. The once fragile dog, who had trembled at every touch, now trusted her without hesitation. His breathing was steady, calm, and for the first time, Maya felt the weight of the last few months lift from her shoulders. Her fingers gently traced through his thick, soft fur as she watched him rest. His body, now filled out and strong, was a stark contrast to the emaciated, sickly creature she had first met. He had become a symbol of resilience, not just for himself, but for her as well. The lessons he had taught her, the patience, the quiet strength, were things she would carry with her forever. She glanced out the window at the fading light of the day, the sun setting gently behind the trees. The world seemed so different now, quieter, more serene. Her life had shifted, had expanded in ways she hadn't even realized until this moment. The empty, anxious space she had once carried within her had been filled, not just by the love of a dog, but by the bond they had created, the shared understanding between them. Rex lifted his head slightly, his dark eyes meeting hers, and for a brief second the world stood still. In those eyes she could see it, the trust, the gratitude, the quiet recognition of all they had been through together. He was no longer the broken dog she had found that day. He was whole, just as she was now. Together, they had rebuilt each other, and though the scars of their past would never completely disappear, they had learned to live with them. Maya's heart swelled as she leaned down to kiss the top of his head, her lips brushing against his fur. He sighed softly, nuzzling closer to her, as though he too knew that their journey wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving, about finding peace in the chaos. The months that had passed felt like a blur, each one a step closer to the life they had now. The fear Rex had once carried, the kind that had made him retreat from the world, had slowly been replaced by a kind of calmness that Maya cherished deeply. The trembling, frightened dog who had huddled in corners, unsure of anyone's love, had become a confident, joyful companion. And in the process he had shown Maya how to do the same. In the mornings they would walk together through the neighborhood, Rex trotting beside her, his tail wagging at the smallest of things. Birds, the rustle of leaves, children playing in their yards. All of it brought him joy, and that joy was contagious. Maya found herself laughing more, her heart light, her mind at ease. The world, once heavy with uncertainty, now felt full of promise. With Rex by her side, everything felt possible. Even when the days weren't perfect, even when Rex would show signs of the fear that still lingered in his bones, Maya never let go. She had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about moving forward, one step at a time. And Rex, for all of his struggles, had taught her that no wound, no matter how deep, was too great to overcome. Maya stood up, stretching her legs as the last of the sunlight slipped away, and Rex stood with her, shaking off the stiffness from his nap. She smiled at him, that familiar bond between them stronger than ever. He walked over to the door, pawing at it, a clear signal that he was ready for their evening walk. It had become a daily routine, a time for both of them to leave behind the comforts of home and explore the world together. As they stepped outside, the cool evening air brushed against Maya's skin, and she glanced down at Rex, who trotted happily beside her. The yard had become his favorite place, a patch of grass where he could run, chase butterflies, and roll in the dirt with abandon. He was so full of life now, so free. And she was no longer the girl who had walked into that shelter with a heart full of doubt. She was someone new, someone changed by the love and strength of the dog who had once been broken. They walked down the quiet street, the stars just beginning to appear in the sky. The street lights flickered overhead, and Rex looked up at her every now and then, his eyes full of a kind of peace that made Maya's chest swell. He was happy. He was home, and so was she. They stopped for a moment at the end of the block, both of them gazing at the stars above. Maya knew that, like the sky, their journey together had no end. The road ahead was unwritten, but the certainty of their bond was all that mattered. It didn't matter what challenges came next. Whether it was something small or something big, they would face it together. The street was quiet, save for the sound of Rex's paws on the pavement, and Maya couldn't help but smile, her heart full to bursting. There was a peace that came from knowing you had fought for something, that you had stood by someone when the world wasn't sure they were worth it. And in that moment, Maya realized that their story, her story, wasn't about saving Rex from the brink of death. It was about the quiet, beautiful truth that they had saved each other. Rex nudged her hand as if in agreement, and she knelt to rub his ears, her fingers threading through the fur that now shone with health and strength. He looked up at her one last time, his tail wagging slowly, and Maya knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They would never be broken again. With one final glance at the stars, they turned and walked back toward home, side by side.